What are, in your opinion, the 3 worst diet mistakes beginners make?
Please like and subscribe. Thank you.
Well, I'd have to think a longer time if I had to rank the top 3, but I will give 3 mistakes that beginners make. One is trying to be perfect right offhand and getting overly technical. When you're a beginner, you just need very basic principles and you can succeed. If you want to lose fat, eating more healthy foods and less unhealthy foods, eating a bit more protein and less fat is a really good start to losing a lot of fat, and you'll get great results. And the next time you diet, you can get a little bit more complicated. You can start to maybe track your meals. And then the next time you diet, you can track your macros and so on and so forth. But I think people just sort of try to get perfect the first time and end up getting overwhelmed. Another mistake people do is fad dieting. They'll think keto is the way to do it. Bodybuilding diet's the way to do it. They only eat clean foods or something like that, or some other kind of diet. And then they end up, getting some decent results sometimes. After the fat loss diet is done, they have nothing to springboard back to because they don't have any healthy habits that they've built. And if you don't have any healthy habits, as soon as you're done dieting, you go back to your unhealthy ways and you gain all the fat back. So I don't know what the point of fat loss dieting was to begin with. Mm-hmm. And of course, the obvious one is that a lot of times beginners lack consistency and I suppose a trusting in the process, whatever diet they are following. Whatever diet you end up following, just do the diet. A lot of people will do a diet and they'll second guess themselves every single step. Well, should I be having 5 grams of fat or 10? They'll be on a keto diet and they'll be like, should I add carbs? And it's like, not now. You just finish the diet, finish your 12 weeks. If keto, you'll get great results and then slowly add carbs back in. So I think those are the top 3 mistakes, and they happen a lot. Maybe not the top 3, but they definitely happen a lot and enough to be worthy of mention.
Yeah, sure. And I know you are quitting yourself now, but what are your basic recommendations for guys that are not really prepping for a show, but just wanting to become leaner for summer, like beach ready, concerning a cut? The caloric deficit, for example, what is your standard recommendation for guys that are prepping for shows? 10%, 20%? Is there any percentage?
I'm not sure. I think of things in percentages. I would say 1 to 2%, or sorry, 0.5% to 1% body weight loss per week, whatever calories that ends up being, and it's usually around anywhere between 300 to 900 calorie deficit for people. So if you eat 4,000 calories per day, usually a 900 calorie deficit's not that bad, and it promotes a lot of really good fat loss. And if you normally eat 2,000 calories a day, if you eat 300 calories less, then it's a good clip for fat loss. So I think lose like 1 to 2 pounds per week generally, and you're pretty good. And I would say the biggest tip there is like also, give yourself enough time. If you diet for 12 weeks and you lose, half a kilo each week, gee, that's 6 kilos. Like 6 kilos looks like something on your body. It's a big difference. But if you give yourself 6 weeks, that's 3 kilos. And if you try to go faster than that, you just rebound really hard and then you look like shit anyway halfway through the summer. So I think giving yourself enough time and just getting a decent caloric reduction between 0.5 and 1% per week body weight. One of the reasons I don't like to give flat out calorie numbers is this: you can cut your calories by a certain amount, and then your metabolism adjusts to some extent. Especially your activity will adjust to a certain extent. Your hunger signaling will adjust to a certain extent, and then all of a sudden your cut isn't what you thought it was. The calorie food cut was initially cut by some amount, but it creeps back up. And then your activity level also drops. So I don't like to say just cut this many calories. Just cut as many calories to start with, but make sure you cut more calories or fewer calories to keep yourself in that 0.5 to 1% body weight loss per week range.
Mm-hmm. Okay, for the same guys, not prepping for a show, but for summer, just being lean, what do you recommend about meal timing? Do you recommend intermittent fasting? Because I read that a lot are doing that because it's an easy tool. What do you recommend?
Intermittent fasting is a fine way to lose weight. It's probably not the best way to keep your muscle on your body. So if you want to be skinny, it's good. If you want to maintain the most muscle you have, I would say eat, 4 to 7 meals a day. If you like fasting, then I say the first couple of meals can be protein shakes. That way you get the benefit of not, having to eat throughout the day as much, and you can eat more food at night or whenever you have your feeding window and you're happier. So I think intermittent fasting is fine, but it's not the best approach. I wouldn't generally recommend it as a first tool.
Yeah, I agree. And what kind of foods do you recommend or eat yourself in these cutting phases?
I don't recommend foods. As a matter of fact, I'm principally against recommending foods. I can recommend food categories. Lots of vegetables, lots of fruits, lots of whole grains, lean meats, lean protein sources, lean dairy, and some healthy fats if you have any fats left over to eat. Olive oil, nut butters, canola oil, things like that. But specific foods I don't like to recommend because there's tons and tons within those categories.
Yeah.
I don't know, what I eat doesn't really matter at all, because there's no magic in anything I eat.
Yeah, but it has to be boring, filling, a lot of fiber.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Whole grain bread. I eat a lot of chicken breasts, eat a lot of lean steak. And by a lot, I mean not that much because I'm cutting. I start every main meal with a bowl of some kind of fibrous vegetable like broccoli or cauliflower or celery. And I eat it first and drink about probably half a liter of salt water, hot salt water. The purpose of that is basically is like a soup, and it fills you up to a surprising extent. You drink hot salt water, and all of a sudden you're like, "Wow, this sucks. I don't even want to eat anymore." And then you eat the rest of your food in 4 hours. I greatly reduce my intake of sweetened beverages. I only have those in the evening with my last meal because they're tasty and they make life fun. But I don't take them in throughout the day because when there is a caloric deficit that is large, having sweetened things just kind of makes you want to have more sweetened things. There's no magic. They don't make you gain weight or anything, but in some situations when you're cutting really hard, you can just make you want more sweetened stuff. So I stay away from things that taste super good.
So you don't even recommend, for example, filling up on Diet Coke just to fill your stomach?
No,
Because
that's totally fine. That's totally fine because for most people it's not an issue at all. Also, Diet Coke has caffeine in it, which makes you feel full chemically. So I think a Diet Coke's a real good thing to have in high abundance when you're losing fat. I don't tend to respond to stimulants all that well, so I don't do that. But I would say, if you have this experience yourself, that having artificially sweetened things, I mean, naturally sweetened things do the same thing. They'll just make you fat so you can't have them. But artificially sweetened things can make your hunger cravings higher on a diet. They don't do that if you're isocaloric at all. I don't know how many people have a Diet Coke when they're eating normally and they're like, I want more of everything. I don't think that ever happens. But I think if you're fat loss dieting really hard and you're really lean, some of this stuff can happen. And if it doesn't happen to you, add as many artificial sweeteners as you want. It does to me. So I try to stay low until the evening hours in which I have, 1 to 3 caffeine-free Diet Cokes every evening. So one of the highlights of my life. If I could get a tattoo of caffeine-free Diet Coke on my face, it would be the easiest decision in the world. I would be a brand representative for no money at all.
Okay, I had an interesting question. Is there a direct relation between the caloric deficit when you're cutting and the decrease in volume what it can recover from? So the bigger the deficit, the lower the MRV, right?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I would say
Kind of relationship.
Yeah, it's almost linear, I think. Yeah. As a matter of fact, it's probably curvilinear that when your deficit really, really gets insane, it starts to drop, like your MRV drops even faster. So that's a good reason for taking it low and steady. I will say I've had more success on this diet than I've had on any previous diet. And hopefully over the next several weeks, I'll have even more success. And one of the reasons for that is my coach, Broderick Chavez, Team Evil GSP on Instagram, recommends the approach of, very slow and very steady and for a long time. So this diet wasn't rushed. I lost basically a kilo a week every single week of the diet so far. I could lose more if I ate less food. That would be stupid. And just because I took a lot of time and went steadily, it worked out really well. So that's a huge recommendation, is to make sure you don't go super fast for no reason.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then another type of question that was really interesting. I myself also noticed that many people get very defensive and even aggressive when you have any kind of critique on their type of diet, or when you don't agree with what they're saying about their nutrition. For example, I come in contact a lot with people doing ketogenic diet, and as soon as you point out any critique, they get all defensive and you're the bad one, and it gets all psychological. Do you have any idea why, and how do you go about those things?
That's a good question. I think one of the first things that has to be pointed out before I address the downsides of being defensive, which I'm hugely against, by the way. I think people who get offended are one of the lowest categories of human you can imagine, or it's the lowest category of behavior you can exhibit is getting defensive or offended at things needlessly. I will say before I start, on the contrary, on the other side of the coin, it is considered wildly impolite in modern society to be critical of a variety of things, and I'm not sure why people think that diets are an exception. For example, imagine one of your coworkers walked into an office, walked into your office or something, and she's wearing a dress, and you're like, "Oh, really? Green?" And she's like, "Yeah, I like the color green." You're like, "That sucks. You look like shit. Like, it's just not working for you. You don't look like shit. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It's just not a great color. It doesn't match you." That would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? It would be like wildly offensive. Like, really? Like, who the fuck are you to tell me that the shit is, like, I don't give a shit. Your opinion doesn't matter to me. It's incredibly rude to critique someone without being asked, right? But of course we get on Instagram, Facebook, etc., and sometimes in real life, and people have an endless amount of criticism on your diet. Like, the thing is these are irrelevant retards on the internet who don't matter, like in the very literal sense of who the fuck are these people. So it's so funny because people like to offer criticism of people's diets online, and they're doing it for entertainment. And I mean that in a literal sense. Like, when you go on Facebook and you critique people's diets, you're doing it to entertain yourself. Why do we know that that's the case? Because it doesn't make you any money. And if you were coming at it from a charitable perspective, you wouldn't come at it in a critical way. You would come at it in a supportive way. So basically, one of the reasons people get offended is because someone is using their thing that they're doing to make fun of them, and that's entertaining that person. It is almost meant offensively if you think about it. And if you don't think about it, then you're just not a very highly skilled social person, and you have no idea, I don't know why someone would be offended that I pointed this out. Well, geez, people get offended at what kind of car? Like, imagine having a car, a Ford Mustang, and someone's like, dude, that car sucks. Why didn't you get a Camaro? We're like, what do you mean? Like, I bought this fucking car, which brings me to my next point. And this is not to defend people that get defensive at dieting, but a diet is an investment. People believe that what they're doing is working. And when you tell them that it's not, that's tough. Right? They made an investment in a diet and they believe that it's working. You told them, like, the last 8 weeks, you sort of were doing something that's suboptimal and you should stop. Another one is ego. People are egotistical, and that means they're both prone to critique things that they have no business critiquing, like diets, and also that they respond very poorly to criticism because they see it as a hit on the ego. So a really non-egotistical person, if someone were to tell them, hey, I think your diet's wrong, if they had the bandwidth to deal with that question, they would be like, oh, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say. If they didn't have the bandwidth, they would, of course, be like, oh, thank you for taking the time to tell me that. Right? But an egotistical person, which all of us are to some extent, especially sometimes, will take this as an affront to their very nature as a human, to their very pride. And basically, someone who's critiquing your diet, they're insulting you. That's how it's perceived because people are egotistical. So probably the number one reason why people get offended when you insult their diet is because they attach themselves to their diet and they're attached their ego to their diet. And because they have sort of valued themselves intellectually to some extent, when they have used their intellect to choose a diet and they chose wrong, you are sort of by extension critiquing their intellect, right? You're saying like, well, if you were really smart, you would have done this other diet. So I think that's one of the number one reasons why people get really defensive. Actually, another reason, this does not apply to all diets, it applies to some kinds of diets. Some diets are ideologically based for people, right? It's a little bit more than just I chose this diet because I thought it was a good diet. For example, if you critique vegans, you're in essence trying to get them to agree with you that murder is okay. That's a stretch. It's just not going to happen. Most vegans are vegan because they think that killing animals is murder. So when you say, the vegan diet's not a good diet, you're not going to convince someone coming at it like that. So some other diets are environmentally based, and some other diets are based on very, very tightly held notions that nutrition is a certain way, and we've been lied to. Like, for example, low carb diets. A lot of people who do them have this understanding that the government has brainwashed people, and corn subsidies, so on and so forth, and carbs are evil. And if you tell someone like that they're wrong, it's more than just ego. It's their entire intellectual framework that they've underpinned on it, and it's very difficult to push them aside. So I would say, if you are a person whose diet is being critiqued, if you have the time to hear someone out, hear them out, because they could steer you right. You could be doing something wrong, And they could steer you right. Like a lot of people critique my diet on social media, and I'm usually, if I do take them on, I'm saying, oh, interesting. What do you think is wrong with my diet? And of course, because I have a little bit of knowledge nowadays, they usually lose that debate. But I think everyone learns from that sort of thing. But sometimes they win the debate, and I change my diet for the better. Like, hey, why are you doing this? And I'm like, reasons. And they're like, that's not good enough. I'm like, fuck, you're right. But on the other hand, sometimes you don't have the bandwidth, and you usually say nothing. Like on Instagram, or on Facebook, you say, oh, thanks for taking the time to critique, and I'd love to get back to you, but unfortunately I'm busy right now. But then for people who do critique other people's diets, I have a whole video series, if you just type this into YouTube, called Arguing to Convince. And it's a hour, 15
I saw that.
Yeah. Hopefully you liked it. And it's one of those things, like, if you really want to talk someone into something, you can't just be like, hey, you're dumb and you're wrong. Because people have egos, they have ideologies, and you have to really navigate that and make sure that you're not coming at people like a dick. You wouldn't go to a dinner party and say someone's food sucked. So imagine, so for example, just a real quick analogy, imagine you went to a dinner party or like a cocktail party, and the host was serving hors d'oeuvres that was just awful. Like, who the fuck made these, right? You wouldn't be like, dude, this sucks, mate. Here's better hors d'oeuvres. You would be like, these are really good. Do you like this kind of fish that you're serving? And they're like, I love it. They're like, oh my God, I love it too. Here's this other recipe I found. See if you like this too. And it's the recipe you really want them to use. They try it. They're like, this is great. They serve it. And then the next time you come over, you're like, oh, thank God, this shit is great. It's not awful like it was. There's no clash. There's no me versus you. And a lot of times on diet stuff, people are coming at it like a war. And if you want a war, you'll have a war. Wars, you crush the other person to win, because that's not legal in civil society. They can just tell you to go fuck yourself, and you just stuck with a dildo in a dark room like every night. So
that's right. Well, here in Belgium, and a lot of books and a lot of people on TV, they recommend types of diets where you can't eat fats and carbs in the same meal. I always wonder, where does this recommendation come from? What is the underlying reason for recommending that? And is that actually a fat diet, in your opinion?
So there's one underpinning way that diet is effective, and here it is. Name your favorite cheat food. Go.
Pizza.
Pizza. Pizza has both fat and carbs, correct?
Yes.
Can't have pizza. What about ice cream? Fat and carbs. Brownies, fat and carbs. Cake, fat and carbs. Hot dogs, fat and carbs. Cheeseburgers, fat and carbs. I could go on. When you tell someone, like, a logical statement, you cannot have both fats and carbs at the same time, it eliminates almost every junk food. And the junk foods that are remaining are like low-fat pop chips, and you can't really overeat those because you just get tired of chewing. Or just fats, and then you have peanut butter. But how much peanut butter can you really eat if it doesn't come with some tasty carbs? Not much, right? This is a diet that basically, by its logical design, eliminates most junk foods, and these are the hyperpalatable foods we tend to overeat the most. So it really does reduce overeating. Unfortunately, it also reduces the category of food like the following: salmon with avocado and brown rice, right? Which is not the most obesogenic food you could have. It fills you up a ton. It's super healthy. And so this super arbitrary way of eating really inconveniences the fuck out of you. So what you could probably be better off doing is telling people, hey, don't eat a bunch of junk food. That's a better idea. But by saying, carbs and fats, you can make people believe that there's a sort of digestive environment thing. I've heard that. I'm sure you probably heard it too. Like, the digestion doesn't work right if it's both, which is funny, because if that was true, if digestion doesn't work right, it would be better to eat fats and carbs at the same time, because they wouldn't digest properly. You would poop them out. You wouldn't absorb them. You wouldn't gain the weight. People who get fat are better at digestion than people who don't. So the diet is pure nonsense, but it works sort of by accident because of its prescription. And we had a fad like that. I remember I was at a picnic, outdoor picnic by the lake that my parents invited me to, and it was a bunch of old Russian people. And this one lady's like, found out that I knew stuff, and she's like, let me tell you about my diet. I don't eat carbs and fats at the same time. And I was like, okay, why? She's like, digestion. And I'm like, I told her why that doesn't make any sense. And she was like, fuck. Like, she had nothing to say, because she was like, oh, but this doctor said it. I was like, yeah, doctors write a lot of books about a lot of stuff. Yeah, there you have it.
Okay. So, but you have these kind of women cooks on TV, and they're really making healthy recipes and no carbs and no fats in the same meal, and they never talk why, and they try to make it delicious, but okay. I understand. It's just to make it
uphill battle.
Yeah.
Yeah, very uphill battle.